When I lived behind the Iron Curtain, I became used to many things. One thing I became used to was being always followed by the secret police, constantly shadowed by spies who thought I was working for the CIA. Everywhere I went, I noticed a shadow behind me, following me, watching my every move. Every foreigner who lived in those countries in those days knew that feeling. Some years before my time, Averell Harriman, the American ambassador in Moscow, experienced the same. Everywhere he went, he was shadowed by secret police. He became quite accustomed to it, as one does. One time, in the dead of the Moscow winter, the ambassador had been invited to the country villa of the British ambassador and was chauffeured through the snow and cold in a four-wheel drive vehicle. He noticed that the secret policeman designated to follow him that evening was in a regular car. Sure enough, after a while the spy's car broke down in the snow. The policeman, knowing that he had to fulfill his mission or be shot, was resolutely determined to continue his journey. He climbed out of his car and started following the ambassador's jeep on foot. The ambassador noticed that in the rear view mirror and told his chauffeur to slow down for the poor man so that he could keep up. Then he noticed that the policeman was shivering in the cold, slipping and stumbling on the snow and ice. He was afraid that the poor man was going to freeze to death. So he said to himself, "I'm doing my job, and this man is just doing his." He told the chauffeur to stop the car, and he invited the policeman to join him in the jeep for the rest of the journey, promising not to tell his superiors. So it was that the ambassador and the secret policeman, the spy and the spied upon, made the rest of that journey together. We all know the feeling of resolute determination when we have a goal in mind. Perhaps no one knows this better than an immigrant. I have listened to so many stories of immigrants and am always moved by the courage and strength it takes to leave everything behind and start all over in a new place where they don't know the people, don't know the customs, don't know the land, and in many cases don't know the language. That takes determined resolution. Most of us are immigrants, or the sons and daughters of immigrants, or the grandchildren of immigrants, and we know those stories very well. My father has often told me the story of when he was a small child, and the whole family, and indeed that whole section of the world, had to leave everything behind and flee with nothing before the advancing Soviet troops. They had to settle in a different part of the world, and it was not easy. They lost everything they had, lost family members along the way. Then when he was just 16, he decided with that same courage and strength to leave behind the difficult situation of post-war Europe, set off on his own and come to America, where he knew no one, where he didn't know the language or the customs. Yes, an immigrant knows perhaps better than anyone else that feeling of determined resolution to make the journey. Jesus had a determined resolution to make his journey to Jerusalem, a journey that he knew fully well would lead him to his death. Yet he never faltered on the journey. he set out with determined resolution and never looked back. Every person born is on that journey to Jerusalem, that walk towards death. We see it, we know it, and yet we fear it. What have we to fear? As St. Teresa of Avila says, the feeling remains that God is on the journey too. Every immigrant knows that consolation. God is on the journey too. When things seem desperate, it is good to remember God is on the journey too. When we are homesick for what we have lost and left behind, God is on the journey too. When we are frightened of an uncertain future, God is on the journey too. What have we to fear? As the French writer Georges Sand points out, one approaches the journey's end, but the end is a goal, not a catastrophe. Let us not fear that goal merely because we have never yet been there. Let us rather embrace it, and with the unbreakable courage of the immigrant, with the undaunted determination of the Christ, let us resolutely walk, no, not walk, but dance towards that goal which alone lends meaning to the journey, towards that end which is our only true beginning, towards that dreaded emptiness in which we find our fullness. In the words of the modern prophet Khalil Gibran, "For what is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and to melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tides, that it may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then shall you truly dance."